Nice to meet you, Helen. I just skimmed
Yeah,
your article and I was very impressed.
thank you.
I want to share it, frankly, on my social media. I don't want to interfere with whatever you're working on now, but if it's okay, I can put it up and share it with people to read.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you. That would be really wonderful.
Great. I know you're doing this for Political Research Associates, and
Yes.
that was for somebody else, so that's why
Mhm.
wanted to check. I also want to. I don't have permission to say this, but it's about to go public in the next few weeks. The chairman of the board of PRA is going to do an interview with me
Oh, wow.
about reevaluation co-counseling. So that's because she was involved with the cult group, and it's been outed. Um, so that's an aside completely, other than you're working for PRA. Do you know Fred Clarkson
Right.
well, by the way?
I do know his work. Yes. I've been using it um in my
Research.
articles so far.
Good. Yeah, he and I go back to the 80s when he first interviewed me about the Moonies when I first got out. So we go a long way back, and he helped a lot with the Cult of Trump book. So as you can see in the acknowledgments, I thanked him profusely.
I
Um,
really enjoyed that book. It was so helpful and
Great.
I'm very new to this subject of cults and um, cultic mind control. Um, so that book was one of the first ones I read, and it was really helpful, and I was really impressed with it.
Good. So, how much time do we have? 30 minutes or what?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
So, I'm going to talk fast, but that's the value of recording because
yes.
you can listen to it again and transcribe it.
Okay.
Um, so, a bit of my story that I was recruited into a front group of the Moonies and
Mhm.
was chosen to be a leader and indoctrinated and groomed by the top people, including Moon and a Japanese man named Kamiyama. And then I nearly died in a van crash, and then I was deprogrammed, and then I was like, what the hell happened to me?
Right.
And so, the long and the short, to cut to the chase of your question, when I first got out of the Moonies, I was approached by a House subcommittee investigation into Korean CIA activities in the United States.
Mhm.
And they were very interested to interview me. I was afraid of being assassinated. I asked them not to do it publicly, that I would answer their questions, and I gave them all of my internal documents, in fact. Um, and I naively thought that this investigation by the House would reveal the Moonies and shut them down, and I could go on with my life. Little did I know that the final report would come out October 31st, 1978, and
Mhm.
November 18th, Jonestown happened, and Leo Ryan was assassinated, who was on that committee, and now Congresswoman Jackie Spear was shot several times on the tarmac. And what happened right after that was Bob Dole had a hearing in the Capitol on cults, and I was
Mhm.
invited to speak, and a survivor of Jonestown was invited to speak, and we flew down to D.C. and we were met by picketers against Dole, saying, "Repeal the First Amendment, elect Bob Dole president," and attacked him for being anti-religious freedom. I was taken off the agenda. She was taken off the agenda. Cult people were invited to speak. The Moonies were invited to speak instead. And I was one shocked person going, what the hell is going on here? An
Right.
American congressman was assassinated. 900 people died with, cyanide laced Kool Aid. And so I started reading the entire Korean investigation, all 11 volumes. And what I learned in one of the transcripts was the former founding Korean CIA director, and I'm forgetting his name, but I'm sure you can find it easily. I think I put the PDF on my website, in fact, for the final report. It's in the library.
You did, and I read it.
Yeah. So he said that he organized and utilized the Unification Church for use as a political tool.
Mm-hmm.
And what I came to understand was that North Korea was brainwashing people. There were two unsuccessful coups in South Korea, and the right-wing anti-communist people decided we've got to create a proxy group or find one and brainwash South Koreans so they'll be good citizens to fight to combat the North Korean brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
And the Moonies were selected. And the former KCIA CIA liaison person, Bo Hee Pak, was his chief interpreter. And during the Korean CIA investigation, he did a big acting job about truth is my sword and Reverend Moon is a persecuted Korean great religious figure, yada, yada, yada. But what I came to learn, and I interviewed former CIA agents and read their books, I was like, oh, the Moonies recruit like the CIA recruits agents. Interesting. And, you know, eventually the dots started to connect in my mind that, you know, MK Ultra didn't end with LSD and hypnosis. Mm-hmm. Despite John Gittinger, the chief psychologist of the CIA, saying that they didn't find anything that worked with mind control and they abandoned their research and they burned their records. Well, they found a whole bunch of boxes that weren't destroyed. And my friend and colleague Alan Shefflin, law professor emeritus at Santa Clara, wrote a book called The Mind Manipulators about the CIA mind control research.
I've been looking for research about that.
The Mind Manipulators by Shefflin and Upton. Alan is in New Jersey, and I did a recent blog using his social influence model that I featured in my doctoral dissertation because we need to make undue influence a legal construct. Mm-hmm. Right now, the cults want to keep it murky and confusing and a religious freedom thing. Well, I say legitimate religion tells you up front who they are, what they believe, and what will happen to you. And authoritarian cults lie, trick, steal, brainwash people and get them to believe that they're following their religious freedom. But what Fred said to me a bunch of years ago is, Steve, you were a Jew and you never would have gone to a Unification Church workshop if they told you it was a church. I said, that's right. He said, well, they've infringed on your religious freedom as a Jew to get you into this right-wing fascist cult. I said, you're absolutely right, Fred. So I'm digressing. Forgive me. Alan, I read his book, and it came out in 1978 when I got 2 years after I got out of the Moonies and after Jonestown, and we became colleagues and friends over all these decades. And he's an expert on hypnosis. He has a master's in psychology, and he co-authored Memory, Trauma, Treatment, and the Law, which won the Guttmacher Award. It's like the Nobel Prize for psychiatry, because it kind of says what is, how do we discern memory, trauma, treatment, and how it fits with the law.
Right.
So where do I want to go with this? So the U.S. was wanting to get out of the Vietnam War. Chuck Colson, who was Nixon's person, gave money to my friend Alan Tate Wood, who was the head of the Moonies political arm.
Mm-hmm.
He's a defector who would probably talk with you. He's done a number of interviews, including with me. And to give money to go on campuses to fight the commies on the campuses, to say, we need war, we need to fight them. But he left the group just like 2 months or 3 months before I got recruited. Because, in his words, because they were turning members into Nazis, was what he said to me when I got out. And I said, I was trained to die on command and kill on command. He said, that's right. That's why I left. People like you. And I was actually selected by Moon. He moved the headquarters from D.C. to New York. He was unhappy with the leadership of the American Moonies. He wanted to make them fanatical. And they took Neil Salonen, the then president, put him in a church at the national headquarters and told me I needed to model for him the proper level of obedience to the Messiah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, and there were all kinds of things like a private leadership meeting where he said, when we take power in America, we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people to have sex with people outside of the Unification Church. And this was all before, many years later, I found out Moon was having sex with all the women followers to purify their vaginas.
Yes.
He had the pure penis. Don't get me started. Anyway.
He was basically a rapist.
He's a total rapist, horrible, malignant narcissist. As you read in The Cult of Trump, I compared Trump with him and Hubbard and Jim Jones. So, where do I want to go from there? So I was like, I think of myself as MK Ultra 2 or MK Ultra 3 because I was a Manchurian candidate. I would have killed anyone on command without question.
But what sort of situation would have required that?
One of my authority figures, Moon or Kamiyama, saying, I have a special mission for you, Steve. God has a providence. You won't understand it, but it's not necessary because you'll be in the spirit world and everyone will be lauding you for your bravery and your courage. You take this submachine gun, go to downtown Boston and kill as many people as you can. I would have done it.
But would that have been something that they would have asked people?
Not in 1974, but what Sean Moon is doing now.
Oh, right.
Is exactly what I was trained to do 47 years ago.
In other words,
They want to create a civil war. They have
right.
a gun factory, a Tommy gun patent. They own the Tommy gun factory patent. They're wanting to hire marksmen, train people in hand-to-hand knife combat for the Civil War, to put in place the new Constitution. At least I don't think the Christian right would go along with it at all, but at least within the Moonies, they're going to put in God's new Constitution and get rid of this terrible secular thing that separates church and state.
I feel like, I'm sure, I mean, you know more than me actually, but I feel like elements of the Christian right do want
100%. So some of them are into speeding Armageddon, right? So they don't care
Right.
about global climate change because God's going to fix everything magically when Jesus
Right.
returns. So, and there are people like Michael Flynn and a whole bunch of other former intelligence officials who are bad actors, whether they're paid off, agents of Russia, agents of New Apostolic Reformation, or being blackmailed. They're bad actors. It's not just Trump came into power not just from Russia, but from within the Council for National Policy. And I don't know if you saw my recent thread about the Washington Times and James Whalen being in the Council of National Policy, and he was put in place as the founding editor of Moon's newspaper. Did you see
No, I
that?
haven't seen that one.
Oh, you got to go back into my posts. I did a blog, and I think the links may be in there.
Okay.
But I have a video of Whalen when he resigned saying the Koreans were trying to dictate news and we don't want anything to do with them. So he resigned and the editorial page editor resigned. But I never knew the connection with the Council for National Policy went back before Moon even got the Washington Times. But now I understand how a foreign Messiah who said Jesus failed his mission, a convicted felon, could own and operate a newspaper in the nation's capital for 30 years, lose over $1 billion in operating expenses without making any money. You know? Excuse me? Are we talking conspiracies? Like, not conspiracy theories, real conspiracies. The Kochs are involved, I believe. There's so many of... Ann Nelson is someone you should interview if you haven't already. And talk to Fred. Ask to speak with him.
Okay. But when you say conspiracies, do you mean conspiracies...
to destroy the separation of church and state, to counter gay rights, to get prayer back in the schools, to take over the seven, you wrote about it, the seven dominion, seven mountain dominionism. All this is about global takeover. And who's behind it? Do they really believe in God? Maybe. But we know for sure the CIA and, you know, the FSB, former KGB, and et cetera, they're all about power and money and sex and trafficking women and children and pornography and Jeff Epstein. They're all interconnected.
So when you said conspiracies, you meant that it was a conspiracy from within the U.S., from within the government.
From the 60s, when they put the Moonies as a brainwashing proxy group in South Korea and then brought them over to the U.S. This was very intentional right-wing conspiracy stuff, justifying the commies are dangerous, so we need to do stuff. The family that Pence is a member of, he was recruited by Colson, as you read in The Cult of Trump. This is a group of people who've been doing the long game for how to destroy American democracy.
So I saw your blog about the CIA connection, and I have been looking online to find additional sources that talk about that, and I haven't been able to. So you seem to be the only source. Did you get that information from the 11 volumes that you read?
Part of it, there's an ex-member I did an interview and blog with who was in the cult for 36 years, Ed Kaufman. And you're going to want to talk to him because when he first got out 7 years ago, he wanted to understand the roots. And he went back before WACL, the World Anti-Communist League, to the Asian Anti-Communist League and the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, and Kodama, Class A war criminal from World War II. there were a lot of Germans brought into the U.S. that the public doesn't know about. I did an interview with Russ Belant. You should read his stuff. Ford was an anti-Semite. He liked Hitler. Hitler had a meeting in Madison Square Garden. They wanted to keep America out of the war in Europe. There was, and Dave Troy is another person to talk to. He traced it back to a coup attempt when the New Deal, when Roosevelt had his New Deal and wanted to decouple the dollar from gold. They wanted to do a military coup using a general who wanted nothing to do with it. This goes back 50 frickin' years. The same actors. We can trace names who are still alive.
That's so interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, except it's factual. It's not made up.
Sort of a tangent on that. I've noticed that Moon's beliefs, the beliefs of the Unification Church, are very similar to the beliefs of the New Apostolic Reformation, which are similar to QAnon beliefs and to New World Order conspiracy beliefs, which from my research, I think that the New World Order conspiracy is just QAnon. QAnon is just the...
So there's a much longer conversation. Let me just check my calendar to see what my next commitment is. But I've really done a deep dive on QAnon. I did a TEDx with Dave Troy and Jim Stewartson. There's a whole lot more about cults being part of QAnon.
Oh, really?
Way back when. Oh, yeah.
So I can find all of this on your website.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful.
I can give you a few more minutes if you want. I can give you another 15.
Okay, yes. So do you believe that what happened with January 6th and everything that led up to it, basically, and everything that's going on now, which is basically, let's get rid of democracy and make the country a one-party, one-rule state ruled by the Republicans. Do you believe all of this is an operation by the CIA or?
Oh, I think so the CIA has got a lot of people in it. Most are analysts. It's the black ops people that are, I think, the bad actors. You can go back to Hoover and the FBI, who was into gambling and was in the pocket of the mafia, and he turned the whole country focused on communism, and Joe McCarthy and Roy Cohn and all of that, so the heat would be off the criminals who were, trafficking women, running alcohol and drugs, and doing all these dirty deals.
So black ops, that, not quite clear on that term. Does that mean people, like you just mentioned, criminals, mafia figures, people who aren't actually in the government?
So I'm by no means an expert on the CIA, but I would direct you to people like Jeff Stein. I forget the name of his blog and podcast and everything, but he's been tracking the CIA forever. The first critical book on the CIA was by Marchetti. It was called The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, because I bought the copy when it was published, and it was all blackened out. It was like this, and the blackout, he went blackout, the whole book was blacked out, and then they kept doing FOIA suits, and eventually more and more of it was fleshed out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, but you do believe that this whole anti-democracy, let's put in a God-centered constitution, all of this that has happened during the Trump era and after, that it was a black ops operation?
But it was happening for decades. This is not
Right,
new.
right.
And um, I wish I could say I know the truth with a capital T. I don't, but I know
Mhm,
what facts I keep uncovering, and it's
mhm.
formulating into a very coherent narrative about power and money and control of the resources of the world. So I don't know if you've heard of a book called Cokeland. I think it
Yes.
was by Thomas. But if you trace the father, he started the John Birch Society. These people have these ideologies in their head, and some of it's white identity. Some of it is neo-Nazi. Nazism and Hitler. He studied hypnosis. They were very into occultism too, the Nazis. This was not just a
Yeah,
political thing.
right.
So this goes back a long way. I've recently started doing a deep research dive on the whole issue of colonialism, of how the church told to missionaries, when you go to America, kill the native, convert them or kill them, steal their children, put them in residential schools, and wipe out their culture, teach them English, put them in suits and ties.
Mhm.
This has been going back hundreds of years. This isn't CIA wasn't even thought of yet. But these are people who are like, how can we go into a place, take their resources, and, Genghis Khan. This is part of human history, predator and prey, and people who
Mhm.
think that they're blessed by the divine, the sun god, Pharaoh. Kill these people because we feel like it or because it's going to be a good sacrifice. So it's not the formula of human rights is new. The idea of women's rights is new
Mhm.
relative to human history. The idea that children shouldn't be slaves is new.
Right.
So we have to step back and go, okay, let's try to be as objective as possible on human history. Where are we now, and what are we going to do to save human rights? Because right now, the bad people want confusion and conflict. They're using the platforms to that effect. They're gathering data on everybody to know how to manipulate them more. Nobody's being protected, especially in America, in terms of privacy. So it's like, help.
Um, well, what do you think is the end goal? What is the,
Power.
how would that manifest?
Wiping out all the enemies and them being gods. I
So
literally believe, they literally said to me, Helen, Steve, what country do you want to run when we take over the world? You should be thinking about this now. This was
that's
1974. I was like 19, 20 years old.
that sounds just like the New Apostolic Reformation, where they
They have
want an
400 million
apostle to.
people. That's right. But all
But
of that goes back to Pentecostalism, which is a new construct. Christians don't realize this isn't biblical.
mhm,
All of this, God gives me a revelation, and the world is dominated by Satan, and I can cast out demons. This is all stuff that the Moonies were doing and teaching.
Do you think that the New Apostolic Reformation is just a reformulation of Mooney beliefs?
I don't know what I could give the Moonies credit for this, honestly. Maybe. But um, do you know anything about multi-level marketing cults?
Yeah, I've read a little bit. Yeah,
So NAR is like multi-level marketing for Christianity. It's like sell them a dream, convince them they can, live eternally and make a fortune, and have them. And my model is control their behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. Make a pseudo self that's dependent and obedient, and control information so that people can't question. And people are made to feel like they're stupid or crazy if they don't agree with the
right.
policies coming down.
I know we're out of time. I have one quick question if you have time.
Go ahead.
Do you think that I mentioned it in my email, Officer Fanone? Uh, and do you think that there is hope for the country to not fall into mass conditioning? Um,
100%.
okay,
Otherwise, I would just go scuba diving and fishing and not worry about it. I really think we have no choice for our survival and for the future, for our children and our future generations. This is it. This is really, we're in a lot of trouble, and we need smart people with resources to start understanding, correctly diagnosing what's really happening. And I have a lot of constructive ideas for what to do about it, but it's like mass education is what we
right.
need. I need to change. We need to change the law. We need to hold Trump and everybody who is inciting the riot and the insurrection to be put on trial.
Mhm. Right. But that's probably not going to happen.
I can only do what I can do, and I can only say what I see as the solution. But what is interesting and what gives me a lot of hope is there's a lot of ex-members of cults,
Mhm.
like many millions. And if they understand what I know, and we get 10% of them to become verbal and activist, we can start getting a lot more people out of the cult of Trump.
I hope so. I see that as the key to averting a one party rule state.
Yep. Yep. But part of the thing, and Fred said it's never going to happen in our lifetime. Forget it, Steve. But I want to see all of the cults that have religious tax exempt status from the IRS. If we can prove that they're systematically lying to people to recruit them in the first place, take away their tax exemption status and start, holding the leaders accountable for
Mhm.
trafficking.
Oh, wow.
Trafficking is an international crime. And my dissertation connects the dots with labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking. I was a labor traffic victim. I worked 7 days a week, 18 to 21 hours a day for no pay for
My
a
God.
multi-billionaire.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that in the context of labor trafficking, but now that you mention
Fraud,
it, light
force,
bulb.
and coercion. Look at my doctoral dissertation. I have a link on my
Okay.
website. And as it's should be a crime for pimps or traffickers to groom and indoctrinate people, give them a new name, new clothing, and make them do horrible things to make
Right.
money for them. The same as needs to be employed around the world.
I
Welcome
hope.
to my world, Helen.
I've been in this world a few months now, and I find it, on the one hand, horrific and depressing, but on the other hand, so interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and like we're on a boat that's sinking. It's like, are we going into lifeboats? If so, where are the lifeboats gonna land? Who's gonna pick us up if we get in lifeboats? Like, I don't want to lose America. So I'm all in. That's why I keep messaging and doing blogs and